A lot of my viewers are business owners and some of them are buyers. You talk that cash flow is probably the main or only thing that you feel is the most important thing. Can you share what you mean by that and why business owners should focus and pay attention to right now?
Yeah, so I always say that cash flow is the only business problem, because any problem that you have in a business, even if it's a people problem, you can trace it down to some cash flow impact. And so I always think the discipline of focusing on cash flow, and you change that perspective a little bit, can really help business owners of all sizes. And really what I like to say is, if you know how to put cash in motion the right way, then you can solve your problem, right? There's that saying, cash is king. And I always say cash may be king, but cash flow is queen, because when it's standing still, it's doing nothing. But if you put it in motion the right way, that's when you can get to the outcomes that you really want.
Building a legacy starts with the bold decision to take a leap of faith. Behind every empire lies a foundation of grit, willpower, and the courage to take big risks. Welcome to Entrepreneurship Unlocked, where world shakers in the business world gather to share their stories. We're diving deep into the mindset of the modern entrepreneur to show you exactly what it takes to become truly unlocked. Join us in the pursuit of excellence with your host, Seth Rudin. This is Entrepreneurship Unlocked.
Hey, good morning. This is Seth Rudin from Entrepreneurs Unlocked. Thank you for joining this next video. I got a great friend of mine, Camille Nisich. We worked together at Dell for nearly 20 years. I guess she worked at Dell for 20 years and I worked there at 10. She outlasted me and she did great. I look forward to having her share her story. Camille, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks so much, Seth. It's a pleasure to be here on the show. I'm already a fan. I've been listening and watching. But yeah, my name's Camille Nisich. I am an independent growth advisor and executive coach. I've been out on my own for about, it'll be 8 years later this year, which is hard to believe. But, like you said, prior to that, I worked at Dell, and I'm a big fan of being a cash flow catalyst in my clients' businesses. And everything I'm looking forward to doing is saying, how can we put you in the best cash flow position so that your business grows and you get the exit you desire? So looking forward to this conversation.
Where does time go? It's going so fast.
I know.
8 years on your own, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Most people don't realize the United States Department of Labor has a stat that usually 90% of businesses will fail within the first 7 years. So you've done it. You've got there.
Yeah, it's been a journey, as you well know. But yeah, maybe we'll get into a little bit of that too. So we can go wherever it is you would like to go to help your audience.
We both spent a lot of time at Dell. You spent over 20 years at Dell. Can you talk about how that shaped your perspective on small and medium business?
A couple things. First of all, I think you probably recall the focus on cash flow. It was something that we always talked about, at the end of, reporting earnings and everything. And that discipline around getting the right mix of cash flow and pulling the right levers is something that I have kept with me throughout, beyond my time at Dell. But I also think that a lot of times I encounter small and medium businesses who really should be scaling stuff from larger companies' playbooks, and they're almost hesitant. And so that's one of the things that I really like to do, is to say, it may not look exactly the same, but you can take those principles and apply them in your business.
Do you feel the small owners are just working, in the forest versus seeing the forest over the trees?
Yeah, they're so heads down. And, I find that it's like, okay, we're so focused on what's working, which is the thing to do. But sometimes you need to peek up a little bit over the trees and say, okay, what's that next level that's going to get me what I need? And it's not a chasing of that next level, but it's a metered strategic approach to it that can help you kind of have those smooth growth trajectories, scaling, et cetera. So, yeah.
And take the pressure after worrying about making payroll every month. I'm sure that's a stressful. Your folks, yep. Great. A lot of my viewers are business owners, and some of them are buyers, right? So the business owners are trying to sell their business. You talk that cash flow is, when we talk offline, it's probably the main or only thing that you feel is the most important thing. Can you share what you mean by that and why business owners, should focus and pay attention to right now?
Yeah. So I always say that cash flow is the only business problem, because any problem that you have in a business, even if it's a people problem, you can trace it down to some cash flow impact. And so I always think the discipline of focusing on cash flow, and you change that perspective a little bit, can really help business owners of all sizes. And really what I like to say is, if you know how to put cash in motion the right way, then you can solve your problem, right? Cash standing still does nothing. And so, there's that saying, cash is king. And I always say cash may be king, but cash flow is queen, because when it's standing still, it's doing nothing. But if you put it in motion the right way, that's when you can get to the outcomes that you really want.
Do you think that the employees appreciate that as much? Like how to help the business owner be successful?
I think that in the right types of businesses, and I'm sure you've seen the gamut of this, when there is I've seen, like after a transaction has happened, when there are people who stay on and what have you, it's because they were really bought into the whole health of the business being health for them and their lives too, not just they're feeding, the owner's beast, if you will. And so I find that if you can connect what they're doing and the outcomes that they want and that they are driving to that cash flow and explain it in a way that they can understand it, they're definitely bought in. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm sure they appreciate that. What's the most common cash flow problem that you see when you're assessing this with your clients?
Yeah, the most common thing that I see is that a strategy, usually on the sales side, was working and then it stopped working. And then they're scrambling to figure out, okay, well, we don't understand. And we almost feel like we don't have the time to figure out why. So we're throwing new strategies at the wall just to try to get us back to where we were, because they have that kind of inconsistency in revenue. And so I always like to tell them, let's figure out a way to just kind of pump the brakes a little bit. Let's figure out what your biggest lever is that can get some influx of cash now, because once they can take a breath, to your point of that whole, like their heads down, they're worried about payroll and all the different things. If they can take that breath with a little bit of an influx, then we can kind of really go figure out the root cause of what the issue is. And oftentimes there is some sort of lever that they can pull, but they just can't see it, right?
Makes sense. And these are going to have big implications, both, day to day when they're in the main street of their business, but also when they go to sell. Can you talk about what is the impact of the owner and how this can impact when we go to market with them?
Yeah. So, and I know you know this, but like, if we think about, the average owner, 80 to 90% of their personal wealth is going to be tied up in that business. So, they have a lot, like most of the skin in the game. And so if we can show them that, hey, if we can put some things in place that already leverage the amazing work that you've done, you can actually realize that wealth on the back end, on the exit. But I think sometimes, and obviously there's extenuating circumstances. We all know that there's different reasons that owners will exit, and sometimes it's not within their control. But when it is within your control, if you can just kind of take that beat and say, I need to know where to fix the most critical problems so that when I go to sell, one, I'm not passing those problems on to the next owner, and two, I'm getting the value out of this business because they don't have to go fix that problem, right? So, yeah.
There's a lot there to unpack. One, you got the business cash flow and making it healthy and consistent so that when we present it to a buyer, right, that they see, wow, I'm buying a great business.
Yep.
Right. And banks are going to look at that. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Third party people reviewing it, maybe if it's a large business, they're doing a quality of earnings, they're going to want to see consistency in the cash flow. Obviously, the investors, if there's a private equity group for larger transactions. And then, but more secondarily to what you're hitting on is, when it comes to the sale, you're going to get an additional cash flow, right? Your exit, payout, and how are you going to, shield that from taxes and maximize your returns? Because it's not about the price you sell the business; it's about what's the net that goes to you.
Exactly.
So, are you suggesting then that they should talk to their advisor months in advance for their stock so they know what to do?
I think there's a variety of conversations definitely that people should have. It's both that personal finance aspect of things, but also just, I think, and again, you should tell me, and I'd like to hear from you on this, but I find that if I talk to someone about thinking about their exit, usually they haven't really thought about it. They don't have a number in mind necessarily, or they have a number in mind and it's maybe not reasonable. And so,
never happens.
I know, you've never experienced that.
Yes.
So it's like, it's kind of that building the trust so that you can have an honest conversation about what really will move the needle and what really will get them closer to that price that they have in mind, if they have one in mind.
Well, I always think they should have a team, right? So, they should have an M&A broker like myself. They should have a coach like you. They should have an attorney who knows M&A, not an attorney who's their business attorney or their real estate attorney. You're paying them at $400 to $600 an hour. You don't want to be paying a toll for someone to learn how to do M&A.
Exactly.
you need to have a CPA who can help guide you, and then you need a financial advisor, right, who can help plan for the nest egg, right? And so the best sale, in my opinion, is a planned sale, not one that's, hey, it's time to sell, I'm ready to go, let's call and sell it next month. And they happen, and I'm happy to sell with companies. But the best sale is one that's thought out a couple of years ahead, so they can set up the tax strategies in enough time, right, for that exit. They can use you to maximize their revenues or to clean up their cash flow and to hit the things that you're talking about today, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I also see sometimes, and I'm sure you probably see this too, but they might have to kill some products. And again, I feel like the longer you've been in a business that seems like it's working, the less likely you will think about things like that. But, another set of eyes to say, is that product really profitable? Are you keeping it for some handful of customers that really aren't your highest value customers? That kind of thing. Yeah.
So we're talking about aged inventory, go in the warehouse and you see boxes.
It can be services.
Yeah. Okay. So just services that's distracting them they're not getting utilization, they're spending non-productive time on.
Yep. Yeah. I had a client, and maybe we'll talk about this when we get to the SBA piece, but I had a client who I worked with her because she had taken an SBA loan and I was a partner with the SBA lender. And she had a whole rewards program that she paid a lot of money to maintain every year. And I looked at the data, and every month the utilization rate was declining at a rapid rate. And I'm thinking, you're paying for this service, for this program that's supposed to be a benefit to your customers, and they are unsubscribing at an alarming rate every single month. So, yeah.
You got to look at the numbers. What did we learn at Dell, right? You had that little card, the top 10 things you need to know every day. If someone said, how are you? It wasn't, how are you? It was, how's the business doing?
How's the business doing?
But I do want to touch on inventory, aged inventory, sitting, building up, and it's not the movers, or just selling products and building it, and not having a good demand planning team who understands what SKUs you need to be building to sell, or if you're a grocery store to carry.
Yeah, I had that same client had both a service and a retail, kind of operation, and so we definitely had to talk about inventory.
Yeah. There's so many places to go here.
Yes, exactly.
AI is a big topic, right now, and a lot of my clients are getting hit by several people. Should they do AI? I know you have a strong opinion about this. What is your advice to one of my business owners on how they should respond to these pitches?
Yeah, I always say chase the use case, not the tool. So you're going to get people who come to you with what they think is your problem and the solution to your problem, but your business better than anybody. And so what is that one lever that's going to move the needle for you? And if the use case that they're selling doesn't match up to what you need to prioritize, then it's not even worth your time to discuss. And so on the flip side, if you're looking for, again, I tend to see people in that they either need to figure out why the sales aren't working or they're trying to grow. And so, okay, awesome. Let's figure out what is the real opportunity for you. And we can't do that unless we really look at your sales process. But someone who's trying to bring you an AI tool that is for, let's say you're a dentist, specifically for dentists, well, that may not be solving the problem that you actually have in your business. And so really chase the use case that's going to move the needle for your business.
Great. And there's so much to AI, and which tool is still forming, what do you anchor on right now, and which process? So it's expense, revenue generation, and then how about managing fear, right? The employee fear. 70% of America's business are small businesses. How do you manage that?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I'm talking about that a little bit in a post later. But yeah, the fear thing is real, and I think it's all in how the owner will have the conversation about any new tool, whether it's most likely in this day and age going to have some AI component, but with any new tool, it's about how you're presenting it to your people, whether it's truly solving a problem that they have, and then, how do you get in and get out if it's not right for you, basically.
Makes sense. Just was on a call where they were talking about how your company will be found in the future. Today we're used to Google search and finding on your web page, but that's going to go down a lot because they'll be searching it through AI, and you may not even know how your customer found it or have the statistics for it.
Yep. How they found it, and then how quickly you can respond. I think speed is, I actually gave a talk, gosh, about 2 weeks ago, I guess, to some business owners locally. And I was saying, we don't actually, there's going to be a change in the value drivers in every business. Like, full stop, there will be. We can't necessarily predict what they all will be today, but we can predict that speed will be a component. And so how can you be the first to show up in the result? How can you be the first to give a meaningful response? Those are the kinds of things that you can work on today, knowing that the landscape is going to continue to change on some of the other nuances, right? So
I love it. Everything just keeps evolving on itself. It's like iterative process.
Yep.
So I watch a lot of your LinkedIn posts. You're big on exit strategy and being exit ready. Can you expand on what you mean and what my prospective clients who want to sell their business should start doing today?
Yeah. So I always, I had a mentor who had this concept of what he called 5 exits of an entrepreneur, I think. And I added a couple of steps to it. So I call it 7 exits of a leader. They're not necessarily sequential, and they're not necessarily a step that every leader will go through, but it's a progression of 7 steps. I find that in the small to medium business size, they fall in, they focus on really kind of 4 key exits, which is exiting the line, meaning you're no longer doing the work and you're actually managing; exiting the staff, which means you're exiting being the manager and actually going to sales. So you would think that step is actually going to being a CEO, but it's not. Usually it's you're being the key salesperson. And then the 3rd step would be exit the sales, which is, okay, I'm going to stop being the primary sales maker and I'm actually going to be the CEO. And then the way down the list, the last one is exiting ownership. And so typically what I see is that even if a leader wants to do that exit of ownership, they're stuck in the exit around sales. And with any of the exits, no matter which one you're working on, predictability and cash flow are key, particularly when we think about the predictability. It's, can we predictably keep getting the results without me being in that seat, basically, without me holding that responsibility. And when you have that predictability of the outcomes and the results, then you can go to the next step, if that makes sense. So yeah, I focus a lot with my people on how do they get to that next exit that they're working on, and where can they install that predictability. Like, I had a conversation with a CEO probably about 3 weeks ago now, runs a $15 million a year business, service-based B2B. And literally for the last 10 years, he's been running the business for 30 years. For the last 10 years, he has been the sole salesperson, and he has no exit in sight to get out of that role. And so at some point when he's ready to kind of plan his exit, he has to figure out how they can transfer the ownership of that sales role to someone else without there being any hiccup in the consistency of their revenue, right? And so that's a big one that I see a lot of owners get stuck at. Even when I gave that talk recently, a lot of them were nodding like, yep, that's where I'm stuck.
It's so true that the owners, one, they don't know how to invest in sales, or they're just unwilling to spend their money there, but they just don't know. So I would say 90% of the clients I see, they don't have sales team mindset, right? So that just puts them, they'll never exit that sales role in your 7 exits, which I thought was a fantastic way to portray this phenomenon. So well said. And some advice that if anybody is watching this podcast, this is what they need to lock in at. This was such a great comment right there.
Thanks.
From your perspective, working with the owners in the system size, what should the owner be building right now, right? Even if they're 2 or 3 years ahead of selling, that would make their, obviously they want to increase the value of their business.
Yeah, I always say, predictability, which goes hand in hand with clean financials, which I know, you see that, as well as get some SOPs, like make sure you have your SOPs documented, make sure your people follow them, because again, you're thinking about what is going to be the value of the next owner. And that potential owner is thinking, or buyer is thinking, I don't want to have to fix your problems. I just want to add fuel to what you already created and, accelerate it. And so if you can kind of think in that mindset earlier rather than later, you can put things in place like the SOPs, the predictability of your earnings, the smooth cash balances that are hopefully consistently growing. And that will all on paper look like a very healthy business that someone wants to buy.
I always say that buyers are buying a business for what it is today and what they can make it to become.
Yep.
and they're looking, for a lot of the things you said that I'll summarize here, key man risk, right? So removing yourself in those 7 exits, right? Having transparency, so the P&Ls and the tax returns relatively tie to each other, right? You have a growing financials when they're looking at the annual sales each year and comparing it to the previous. Ideally, it's going up or staying flat, not going down, right? And that they're generating, positive cash flow for the business. Employees are not turning over, and you got a durable product that's not going to go away as a fad.
Yep, 100%.
All great things. I know you did something great during COVID. It's not a lot of companies struggle during that time, and somebody called you for help and you increased their sales by 15%. Can you share your story on that?
Yeah. So, kind of a consumer product business. They were having some problems with business model, having some problems with something worked and didn't until it didn't. In this case, it was Facebook ads primarily were driving their sales. And then all of a sudden they stopped working. As we all know, if we thought back to the pandemic, everyone thought, oh, let's just pour some, we can't have physical sales. So let's just pour some money into social media advertising. We'll get all these online sales. And so they had reached a point where they just couldn't scale up their ads. Like they just could not get that. I don't know how much you know about social media advertising, but, you have to, it's a bid system, right? So you have to be able to bid on the eyeballs and pay enough to get those eyeballs that are going to convert. And so it just stopped working. And so what I was able to do was to figure out that, okay, if social media is not working, what other assets do you have in your sales process? And she kind of had 2 key things. She had really high open rates on her email, and she had a very, very loyal customer base. So they repurchased with a level of consistency that we could leverage. And so we basically created a new sales channel for her that was still on social media, but not reliant on advertising, use some automation to enroll them into this new sales channel. And she was able to, when she thought she was not going to be making sales at all, was able to actually increase because she was leveraging those 2 key assets that she had in her sales process. Yeah,
retargeting method. Awesome.
Yep.
Wow.
Let's reacquire the eyeballs you already have and the buyers you already have.
That's the place to go, right? They're your loyal ones. That was good.
Yep.
Sometimes you miss it trying to acquire. There's so many things for a business owner to have.
Yeah, you can't be an expert at everything, and that's why you need kind of the right voices of the right advisors, when the time comes. So yeah,
absolutely. Our favorite people, there's people who kill deals and make deals. Bankers are one of them, right? They can either make you or break you. They're going to look at your financials for the sellers, from a buyer's perspective, and they're going to be looking at cash flow probably. Do you want to talk about what are those key things they should do to prepare for that evaluation?
Yeah. And so, my specific experience, like we talked about a little bit earlier, was I used to partner with an SBA lender, less on the kind of purchase transaction side and more on they've taken some sort of, loan for growth effectively. And so, but it's good. They're going to look at the same things, right? And so I would always tell them, okay, we need steady sales growth and we need smooth, positive cash flow balances. If you have a problem in that area, let's go figure out why. And so, I worked with a variety of businesses, and a lot of times, again, there's a pride, we love business owners, right? There's a pride, and rightfully so, in what you've built, but there also has to be this awareness of, let me consider a different way. And so that was, part of what I loved about my clients. It was, yes, I've taken on some risk to invest in my business, and now I have to also take on a slightly new perspective. And so can you show me some things that I may not know? And again, it's always leveraging the assets that they already created. I'm not usually looking to pull something wild. It's just that, what's that additional unlock that's going to bring you more sales? So it could be, like I said, leveraging your happy customers. It could be, taking a sales channel and minimizing some of the risk that's in that sales channel, whatever it may be. But they're always going to be looking for the same things that a buyer's going to look for, even if you're on the growth side. So I would kind of have them think about it from the standpoint of, yes, you need to service your debt, but in the future, you're also potentially going to want to exit this business. So let's just think about all of the things that you need to do in the same way.
Totally agree there. As they're going to look at the debt service ratio, right? Well, so getting a reasonable price, determining a 10 or 20% down from the buyer, right? And then seeing, can that debt be serviced with, greater than a 1.15 target at minimum, right? Mm-hmm. Some banks have a higher threshold. The lowest is usually 1.15.
Yep.
So, and doing the things you touched on will lead them to that endpoint.
Yep.
Great. What gets you excited when you get out of bed every day?
The chance to solve a problem. Like, I feel like there's people who, are hesitant. And I just feel like if there's a problem, I want to get really curious and I want to figure out how to solve it. And I want to be as not creative in a bad way, but creative in the way that I solve it. Like, I want to try to bring some fresh thinking that you hadn't thought of. And one of the things that I really enjoy with my clients is just when they come to a conversation and you can just feel that anxiety in them. And then we finally unlock, like, okay, this is the right way forward to solve this problem. And you can just see like the ease that comes over them. And I'm sure it's probably similar when they finally find out that, yes, I have a saleable business and this transaction is going to go through or what have you. But I love the gratification of seeing that change in them. So, yeah.
100%. It makes our job so much pleasurable to see the success of our clients.
Yep.
It's all about them. Thank you, Camille, for joining the call and podcast. You've been amazing. It's been so glad to reconnect with you. Hopefully everybody in the audience enjoyed today's session together with us. I know you're in Virginia and I'm in Washington State, but we're still so close together. Camille's information to contact her will be on the next slide. And I look forward to reconnecting with everybody in my audience on our next podcast. Thank you so much.
That's right. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate it, Seth. Thanks so much.